Hi, Will.
Morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah,
Good
whatever
evening,
it is.
whatever we're cooking on here.
So we were going to call this our Father's Day edition.
Father's Day edition.
We're a few days
It's a
late.
little late.
No
but
worries.
Still counts.
Good.
We have Will in today. He is Brock's father and my father-in-law.
That's true.
Yep.
These are all true things.
I think that we've mentioned you on the podcast before, so people will be excited to meet you.
Yep.
I know I've said your name at least once.
Yeah. Okay.
Talking about all good things. Mm-hmm. Talk about how we're similar, I think.
Yes, I remember that when you were.
Oh, you
doing
listen
your
to our
editions.
podcast?
I do listen to your podcast.
We found our one fan.
Just
very
assumed
interesting.
Nobody did.
Was it? I think you said three people did, right? At one point in time.
Yeah.
Oh, you do listen. Okay.
No, I definitely do.
Well, I'm excited to have you today because I think that I'm realizing that the more guests that we have on, I think that I know people well, but there are like big areas of people's lives that I realize I don't really know a whole lot about.
Yep.
And so I'm excited to talk to you. And the reason why I do this podcast is because I like to learn, and hopefully people who listen like to as well. But I like to learn, and so I'm excited to talk to you and learn some things about you that I don't know about you.
Sounds good.
So I thought we would start with telling us a little bit about your growing up and in Lewis County, and I also would like to hear about how and when you became a believer. So if you wanted to incorporate that into your life story. But yeah, like, where are you from?
Okay. Well, I was born in Lowville. I'll be 64 in August. I've been married currently to my current wife for 43 years.
Is there another one we don't know about?
No other one we know about.
Okay,
No.
that's good.
In fact, we will be celebrating our 43rd anniversary on your birthday coming up in about a week, June 27th.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Levi's birthday,
But
too.
so I lived in Lowville pretty much all of my life, except for a couple of years when my parents were doing voluntary service in New Hampshire.
Oh.
But I was young. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. Now, I need to put a disclaimer on right away. If I'm given dates and ages and times that don't fact check them.
Yeah, we don't have a fact checker.
They may be wrong,
on board.
but they'll be close. They'll be in the general vicinity, right?
That's good.
But we lived in New Hampshire when I was young for a few years, and my parents were house parents at a VS unit, it's called. So other than that, pretty much had been in Lewis County all my life. And we currently live in Martinsburg. I had a great childhood. My father worked for a local hardware store for many, many years. And
Shout out to the co-op.
the job at the co-op, farmers co-op. And didn't make a lot of money, but they seemed to always manage to, when I look back at my childhood, I just have a lot of really great memories of simple things that we used to do. We would go camping a lot of weekends in the summer, just down to Whitaker Park, which is, a mile from our place, and you could camp there free. And I remember Dad would work on Saturday mornings until noon. And in that morning, my sister and Mom and myself, we would get the camper packed up, and when Dad got home, we'd hook the car up to it and head down there for the afternoon and evening. Sunday morning, we'd have breakfast and then throw everything in the camper because we had to get home and get ready for church. But a lot of great memories, and it just was, we didn't do a lot of extravagant kinds of trips and that kind of thing. We did go. My dad was a pastor for many years, and we did go to the church that he was with was part of the Conservative Mennonite Conference, and every summer they would have a big conference, usually in Pennsylvania or Delaware or Ohio or somewhere like that. We would usually go for the week and take our camper, and a lot of good memories around that. Just meeting other people from the larger group, and so that was always a highlight of the summer as well. When I was probably 13, 14, 15, those years, my dad went to Rosedale Bible Institute and did some summer classes, and they were usually, I think, 3 weeks long. And so I became a believer. One night we were in the camper, and I was reading a book. And for all you young people listening to this, young boys, the series was Danny Orlis was the name of the series. And he was kind of a detective kind of person and really interesting books. But he was talking about, in the story, was talking to another person and talking to him about, being a Christian and, what happens if you're not, and literally scared the hell out of me. So I thought, well, I do not want to go there.
It's good to get that out of
you. I do not want to end up there. So my dad was sleeping in the back of the camper, and it was late at night. I woke him up, and he came up to the front, and we talked for a little while, and then he prayed with me. And so that was when I became a believer. And it's fairly late, and you'll hear people that, when they're 4 or 5 years old, they have an experience. But for me, it was later on.
How old were you?
I think I was like 14.
Okay.
Yeah. And and ever since then have served the Lord and done my best to, be a good person and to just live my life according to something that I feel would be pleasing to Him. So, yeah.
We are similar in that way, too. I was 14 years old.
Oh,
yeah.
See, there you go. It's another thing.
Yeah, on a mission trip and typical mission trip.
Mm-hmm.
Typical when to become a believer. Anyway, 14 years old was when I became a believer, too. Yeah, that's really cool. Interesting. Go ahead.
Did you guys have, because I know that Grandpa had farm animals and different things and did heifers. Is that something that when you were growing up that you did also?
We did.
Okay, so I've always heard that were you guys dairy farmers?
We were not always dairy farmers. We raised heifers. We boarded heifers for other farmers in the wintertime, that kind of thing. So Dad had to be to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so 5 o'clock, we'd get up and go out and do our chores and get ready. I'd get ready for school. He'd go to work. And then at the end of the day, he'd get done at 5 o'clock, and we'd go back out and clean the barn out and feed the animals again.
Okay. So how many cows were you taking care of?
I would say probably 30, 35.
Yeah.
And they weren't like, they were mostly younger heifers and that kind of thing.
Okay.
No milking cows.
No milking, yeah.
Later on, we did have a dairy farm for a few years,
Oh, let's get that.
You always used to say that was the good life.
Yeah, that's the good life.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is I loved being outdoors. I loved being, in the barn. Just there was kind of a surreal peace. Now, some of the people like my brother-in-law and a few others are going to think I've lost it, but Kurt, which I think he's had him on. But I loved going out like late at night, and the cows were just kind of munching on their hay and just kicking hay up to them. I didn't care for the field work as much, but I really enjoyed working with the cows and the challenge of, milk production and seeing what you could do with them and that kind of thing.
Well, it'll be great to have Kurt back on and hear the exact opposite.
Because this was like his trial time, right? This was Kurt's Job experience being on the farm.
Right.
Yeah. What did you guys do as far as field work? Like, what was the extent of your farming?
So putting in crops, planting crops,
Oh, wow.
mostly harvesting. We didn't have a large farm. When I was on my father-in-law's farm, I was planning on taking that over. We milked around 40 cows, and they had a nice setup there. They had a little milking parlor, and so I enjoyed that. But the part that I always say is the good life, it's because the family's around. I think it teaches children and young people a really good work ethic. And I think that's very, very important for our culture today. I think that some of these people that are out doing nothing but protesting and stuff need to get a job and learn a work culture and
For sure.
and just be positive contributors to society. And growing up on the farm, you know, it was hard work, but at the end of the day, you felt that satisfaction that, you know, we worked hard today.
Yeah.
That was a good thing.
I got a taste of the farm life a little bit because Grandpa was still boarding heifers up until probably my high school years, I think. So I got a little bit of a taste of getting up at 4:45, going out and hanging out with the cows for a little while. But I actually enjoyed the field work, I think, a little more, which is interesting. And I think that the part you were talking about with the dairy farm was the processing and optimizing all of your functioning assets, I guess you could call them, making sure that your production is at a high level, kind of the back workings of a business, which is interesting now, the field that you're in and what you went in to do.
Right.
That's kind of, you know, an entrepreneurship.
It's a similar idea for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I always love talking about farming. I have nothing to do with farming, but I don't know why. I just find it really interesting. So that's cool.
It's the good life.
It is. So we've heard.
So you've heard.
There is something to working with your hands. There's something to be close to your family. There's something to hard work. And we talk about that all the time. Doing hard things and the feeling that you get when you're done is just...
And you have to persevere through it. I mean, there's hard things with it. It's not just easy come, easy go. You know, it's a long day. It can be a long day, and you know, you can come up against obstacles just like we do in our everyday life now. You know, I think there's something that's taught to younger people and to children when you have to press through this. You can't just quit. You can't just walk away from it, and you know, and there's a value to that.
Is the barn that's still there? That's the barn.
Up at my parents'?
Yeah.
That's the one, yes.
That is the barn, yeah. So do you ever like walk in there and feel the memories?
Yeah, for sure. I for sure do. It's a lot of good memories, and you know, Dad and I spent a lot of time out there together, and I treasure those.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and you always will.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're in your teens and you're going to school. And is that where you met Mom?
I met her at a wedding, but I noticed her at school.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And we kind of, she went to a different church than I went to, but our circles intermixed a little bit. But I met her at one of my cousin's weddings. I was an usher, and she was one of the singers playing, you know, she was one of the special music girls with Cherie. And we just kind of started hanging out together after that, and for some strange reason seemed to end up at the same places together and would end up riding home. And one convenient thing was one of my cousins that I was really close to, Darwin, ended up working for Dawn's father, Mel, on the farm. So that gave me a good excuse to go up and see Darwin, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so that was kind of the beginning of our relationship.
Okay.
Interesting.
Pretty vague.
The details.
Anything else you want to say?
Yeah.
No.
So
really.
how old were you when you guys when you met and would have been hanging out and stuff?
So I
Facebook
would have been,
official?
Yeah.
What was it? Facebook official. Let's see.
Going steady.
I would say, yeah.
Courting.
I was probably 18. She was 16. So, by the way, for those of you that have little girls at home, that's way too young.
18. Yeah, my girls they're not going to have a boyfriend until they're 40. Yeah, I think that's what I decided.
I hear you.
Oh boy.
But yeah, so we ended up kind of more hanging out together than dating and that kind of thing. But eventually it became more of a serious relationship. And we got married in 1981.
Okay, so she was 18? Mm-hmm. How old were you when you started dating, I guess?
I was 18 when we started dating. I was 20, almost almost 21 when we got married.
So you were born in 1960, so that's 1978.
Yep. Was when
And
I
then
was 18.
you guys were kind of together for 3 years before you got married.
Yeah, on and off. Yep.
Mom will fact check all
And
this.
she will definitely fact check that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So go from there.
So, yeah, as our relationship got more serious and stuff, we ended up getting married. We have pretty much lived in the same location for 43 years, minus a number of months when we moved up to my father-in-law's farm when we were planning on taking over his farm, that business. My brother-in-law was in on that. We were going to do it together. And after a number of months, it just didn't kind of work. So we left, and we actually lived in a trailer on my dad's property. We got some land from my dad. We had our first two boys, Tyson and Tyler, while we were living in the trailer. And then we put up the house that we're in now. So we have a little bit about my family. We have 7 children. We have Tyson, who's the oldest, Tyler, then Brock, and Calder. So we had 4 boys. Then we had Brielle, who's married to Nick. And then we have Tierra and Melissa. So that should total 7. We did foster care. Dawn has a real heart. I mean, she's pretty amazing. Just has a real heart for nurturing and taking care of children and other people like that. So we did foster care for, I think, almost 18 years, which was good, but it also had its, I don't want to say negative side, but it had a side to it that it makes a lot of changes for the rest of the family. The rest of the kids have a lot of adjusting to do with that as well. It's not just bringing somebody into the house and everything's great, because you're adjusting to more people in the house and different personalities and different issues and problems. And so, that's a lot. That's a lot to weigh out and to think about. But the neat part of that is, some of those children we had in our homes, we still hear from today, and we still have somewhat of a relationship with a few of them. So that's good. You try to influence people where you can and be a positive factor in their life. And so that's happened a number of times with a number of them that came. But it's hard to see them, sometimes they go back into a situation that is not healthy and not good. And so that's kind of tough to do sometimes. But
yeah, and outright toxic.
For sure.
And seeing the, maybe progression while you're with them, and then see it slip back into kind of the old ways.
And abusive, a lot of times they're coming out of an abusive situation for a while, but then you see them go right back into it, and it's like, what's the results of this going to be, And so that was kind of heart-wrenching at times.
Yeah.
What so the early days of marriage, were those hard years? Were like economically, like kind of jobs did you have? Like what did those early years look like for you and Dawn?
So
trying to get by.
Yeah. So I remember we would go to the grocery store, and Dawn would have an uncanny knack of being able to total things up as she went. And I remember her putting things back on the shelf, because we knew what we could afford, and that's what we got. And, were we any worse for the wear? No. We ate just fine, but it was different because we had to keep track of our budget and our expenses. And so looking back at it, I don't even think about that anymore, as far as what it was like then. As things progressed and, I would get a little better job, we'd make a little more money, so we'd have a little more freedom. But our vacations, this is kind of funny because, you see the life creep that happens over the course of your life, right? And our vacations when our first couple of kids were born or were at home and a little older, and you would have remembered this too. We would take a weekend and go to friends' houses and spend the weekend. And, we might order in pizza one of the nights, and that would be like the big night, and we would be all excited about that. And we'd go to Daryl and Sue Miller's quite often. They lived down in Batavia area. And the boys loved it. I mean, they probably would say that was one of the highlights of their growing up years, And it's just now to think about doing that for a vacation, it'd be like, what are you, crazy? It's like, now, we go to 5-star resort, and if we don't get the right room, we're not happy.
Yeah, life creep.
Yeah. I know that, like, we're blessed. I'm sure you would agree with this. Like, I've heard a little bit about that, those early years, and my parents have a very similar story. Like, it's the grocery store analogy. Like, it's the whole, like, walking through the grocery store with a list. You're price checking your list to make sure you didn't mess it up as you're pulling stuff off the shelf, and you're putting stuff back. If you were like that whole thing, like, never had to deal with that. Yeah. Like, that's how I know we're blessed.
Yeah.
And
my parents talk about that. I've heard you talk about it, and I'm like, man, like, I never had to do it. Now, that's not to say that we made a ton of money, but, like, we had enough, and that is a blessing. It doesn't take much to be blessed.
Yeah.
Because our early years were pretty meager too. But, like, we never had to do that, and that's how I know we're blessed. Like,
and that's like a scale in. Like, if
I can't even relate to that.
No, if you're at the gas station, it's the same thing. Yeah. Or so if you're at the grocery store is what I mean. That's kind of like a microcosm of the whole story, because if you're pinching pennies at the grocery store, that means you are on the button with everything else, because eating is essential pillar.
Do you remember when we would when we started a church in Lowville called Rhema Fellowship, and we had Sunday night services, and there was a pizza place in town called Papa Joe's.
Yeah,
and
Papa Joe's.
On Sunday night, we knew ahead of time that a lot of people were going to go out for pizza afterwards. And we also knew that you could get a large pepperoni for $8.99, and for another $1, you could get a medium cheese pizza. We would save up all week because we knew we were going to want to go, and our kids were going to especially want to go out to Papa Joe's on Sunday night. So, during the week, we didn't run to McDonald's, or we didn't run to Jeb's, or or Lloyd's, or the PB&J Cafe, or anything like that, because we were thinking ahead. We need $10 because we're going to want to go out for pizza, and it's just the way things were. And so we did. We almost probably 90% of the time we ended up being able to go out for pizza. But it's just those little things that when you look back and you think, now we don't think anything of going out for pizza. It's like, you want to go out for pizza tonight, hon? Oh, sure, let's go. And so I think there was some valuable things that we learned during that time and could appreciate. We could appreciate those times where you had to just kind of tighten the belt buckle a little bit. And
well, James, the book of James in the Bible says to cherish that as opportunity. For growth and faith in the Lord.
Yep, for sure.
I know for sure, because when I was growing up, I didn't know that. So you guys did a good job hiding the financial stress.
Yeah.
Because if you were to tell me to look at my childhood, I would have never thought that we were, just getting by.
Well, and it was important to us. We homeschooled, and so it was important to us that Dawn was able to stay home and do that and be with the children and raise the family, raise the children. And so it was I don't want to say sacrifice, because that sounds like really, some big deal, because it really wasn't a sacrifice, but it was just making decisions and making choices. And so good things, and like I said, it was kind of similar to my whole camping experience going to Whitaker Park. Like nowadays you wouldn't even think that would be fun probably, but back for me it was, and for our kids, going to Papa Joe's was a great memory too.
Oh yeah.
So Plus
Yeah, it's
all
good
their
perspective.
a lot of their friends were there, and so it was a big party.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would think sacrifice would be maybe a word that could be used there, but definitely intentionality with your finances, because we don't have that problem right now. But I think that it would be hard to go back to a situation like that and then have to relearn how to allocate your funds
Right.
correctly.
Right.
You know,
And the thing is, as a parent, you want to see things for your children better than what it was for me. Like, I want to see my family members to be able to not live at a higher level, but to be able to experience earlier than what I do now, kind of, that kind of thing. And so you always want your children to be able to be a little better off, and the grandchildren, it's kind of this rolling idea, but it may not always be like that.
yeah,
It may not always be like that.
and to be able to prepare that
Yeah.
that isn't guaranteed tomorrow.
Right.
The world is an unstable place.
Yeah.
I think my experience growing up, and we'll wrap up right before this segment, I am so appreciative of that aspect of the way you guys parented, and just, okay, we're going to save up so that we have $10 at the end of the weekend, so it's special for the kids.
Yeah.
Or it's providing for the kids. I think of the movie Cinderella Man with Russell Crowe. There's a scene in there that always gets me, and he is working nonstop at the docks, trying to get work during the Great Depression.
Yep.
I think he has a broken hand at one point, and just his children were hungry. And in the morning, he woke up, and the daughter had finished her piece of salami already, and he had one on his plate. And so he starts telling and basically protecting her and saying, like, I had a dream and I had this big juicy steak and I'm already full. So he gives her his piece.
Yeah.
And so, like,
That's what you do.
that's what you do, man. I mean, that's what it's about right there. And his stomach's growling, and his wife's like, you can't, you got to be working all day. But that's what you guys did. And I appreciate that a lot. So,
as parents, you do what you need to do.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's wrap this section up. We'll come back. I want to get back to some of the family stuff again
Sounds good.
in marriage. Okay?
All right.
All right, be right back, folks.
that movie is we're back. That movie
We
is
made it back. Here
got
we
a
are.
lot of those moments. That's a good
Top
movie.
5.
Yeah, Cinderella Man.
Yep.
Yeah, the scene where he
Maybe
is,
top 10.
collecting the change from the club owners, so he could like
Put the
compete- or
power on. That
pay
was
his
so he
loan.
could. That's so he could get heat in his apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's a tough one.
When I had taken a trip to India at one point in time, a number of years ago, and I remember we were walking basically through the jungle on this trail, on this path with our interpreters and the group that we were with. And all of a sudden, here in the middle of the trail was a newborn baby just laying in the middle of this trail. And we stopped and we're like looking around, and all of a sudden we seen the mom, and she was over kind of in the jungle area looking for berries. And she was basically hunting for food for their family for that night, So, we want to put things in perspective. That's a perspective we can look at.
Yeah.
Pizza was kind of a luxury.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out, you were blessed as well.
Yeah, for
that's a
sure.
good point.
Well, generationally, like you were saying before,
Yeah.
is that when you look at your dad?
Oh, we never ate out. I mean,
No. But what about him when he was a child?
that would have been unheard of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You tell the story. Can you tell the story real quick about the Christmas gifts they used to get?
Yeah, they would probably get like a piece of fruit, maybe an orange. And I don't ever remember him saying anything about getting like any bought-in toys. Now, Grandpa would get an old barrel, and he would make, they called them skipjacks. They would cut the barrel so that it was rounded, and then he would build a little seat on it, and they would slide down the hills in the wintertime on those, and that would be a huge deal. But it would be just something simple, something homemade. But regular Christmas times, they were pretty excited to get some fruit.
Yeah. I like what you said. It puts it all into perspective.
Yeah.
And it almost should be a requirement for everybody to have to go to a third world country just to get some of that.
Yeah, it would be
And
good. It would be good for people.
You could have a little more appreciation. Yeah. But also with children, now that I have my own, I can absolutely say that I'm willing to do all of those things. And I would.
You're going to give them that piece of bologna.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, man. That's crazy. What was did you have a big break? Did you have a big break in a job or anything like that? Like, do you have a moment where you thought, okay, wow, like we're doing better. We're going to make it.
Yeah, I would say, I worked at, a number of different jobs. Like I worked for a Countryside Vet Clinic for about 5 years, and that was kind of stabilizing because you got a check every week and it was pretty much the same amount. So you could budget and that kind of thing. I got laid off from that job, and then I did carpentry construction for a few years. And I remember going into Sherwin-Williams one morning to get some paint for a job we were doing. And when I left, I said to Craig Shaw, who was my boss, and I said, that'd be a fun place to work. Just kind of out of the blue, not thinking anything of it. And I think it was like maybe a week later, and the guy that was the assistant manager at the Lowell Sherwin-Williams store, I saw him in Watertown in one of the stores in the mall. And he said to me, he goes, hey, he said, I'm going to be transferring to the Watertown store, and Brian, who was the manager at the Lowell store, mentioned your name. So I'm like, interesting. So I stopped in and ended up getting hired there. And that was really probably a big break for us because it was a good job. It had some decent benefits. And I mean, I lived 5 minutes away, so I just could get to work quick and get home quick. And that was really nice.
That must have felt amazing.
Yeah, it did, and it was like, oh, this is kind of a professional job. We were supposed to wear a tie every day, but both Brian and I kind of kept them tied on the side on our desk in case the district manager showed up, But
yeah, you don't want to wear a tie in Lowell.
You're mixing paint.
Yeah.
If your tie gets caught in the mixer, you're going to be spinning around and around and around.
Yeah, I mean, when you're selling like paint to the
contractors,
like, why are you wearing a tie? It doesn't make any sense.
But Brian, an amazing man, Brian Olmsted, and I worked there for, I think, almost 12 years.
Wow.
And he was a mentor in a lot of ways, where just a wise man, Brian, I hope you're listening to this because your jokes are really bad, but he thought they were really good. He'd crack himself up.
That's great.
But I love Brian. He was just wonderful to work with, and our personalities were very different, but we just hit it off, and we had a lot of fun. And so that job really kind of allowed us a little bit of a different lifestyle, where we could be a little more free and a little more available and that kind of thing.
Do you remember what you were making an hour at the time?
At Sherwin-Williams, probably like between $7 and $8 an hour.
Yep. This would have been in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember coming down there.
Yep.
I remember hanging out in that place. Yep.
So and from there, I left there because the church that we had started, actually a little over 40 years ago now. Rama's over 40 years old. Can you believe that?
No way.
Yeah. Because I think Tyson was either just born or was...
No kidding.
Close to that.
Okay.
So anyways, I left Sherwin-Williams because I was pastoring at the church. I was part-time. And they wanted me to come on be more available. So I switched from Sherwin-Williams and went to, it was a True Value store at the time, right in town. And was there for 5 years. And the church decided they wanted me to come on full-time. And so we did that, and we did that for a few years. Through a number of things, we ended up leaving the pastorate in that church. But I remember the really big break that has kind of propelled us to where we are today. Dawn and I, we were going through a really, really hard time. And so we took a couple of days and we went to Lake Placid just to get away, just to have some time for the two of us and to just kind of pull back from the situation. And so we're walking down the street in Lake Placid and my cell phone rings. And it was a guy named Dennis Byrne who was a sales rep for a flooring company that I remembered when I worked at True Value. He was one of the sales reps. And he said, Will, it's Dennis. He said, I hear you're thinking about starting a flooring store. I'm like, where did you hear that? Because, I mean, Dawn and I had talked about, if we leave the pastorate, what will we do? And so that was one of the things we had mentioned, but I have no clue to this day where he would have heard that. So we talked, and it ended up then that through a series of events in the course of time, we did end up starting our own business, which is where we are today. And we are, that was in January 2006 that we started the business. So
18 years.
18 years.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit more about those in between moments, like what went into taking that leap and making that decision? Because you're a good example of a high quality entrepreneur.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I think people would love to hear what went into that decision, and getting the call from Dennis, you said, to deciding to do it. What happened in between then? What went into that decision? Was it hard? How did you do it?
The first thing I told Dawn was, because the church was very gracious and they had given me 3 months, I think, of just a paid compensation.
Okay.
So that was really, really wonderful of them to do that, and very fortunate. And we love the church. We love the people from there still. We're some of our closest friends are from that time. But I remember telling Dawn, I said, so for the next 3 months, you better save every penny you can, because we don't know for sure what we're going to do. And if we decide to start a business, that doesn't mean that it's going to work. You're not guaranteed just because you put a shingle on the wall that people are going to come in, right? So we started looking into that, and I'm a little bit of a risk taker. I guess I like to consider myself more of a calculated risk taker. So I'm looking around and kind of seeing, what's needed in the area, because I didn't want to just put up another pizza shop when everybody sells pizza, the gas stations and the grocery stores and all that. So we didn't want to do that. And I thought, I know flooring. Let's try that. And one of the things that happened during that time, Ben and William Roggie were, Ben was an installer. He had installed for many years, and we were very close. Ben and I were very, very close for a lot of years. We coached Little League together. We coached softball together. We were involved in church stuff together, and just family. Luann is my aunt. She's my mom's sister, so we were at family get-togethers. And Dawn and I were like, what if Ben and Luann would join us, in this venture? So we talked to them a little bit about it, and they were on their way to Spain to see their son and daughter-in-law who lived over there at the time. And they said, we'll take this trip and we'll think about it, and we'll pray about it and see what we think. And Ben says on the way home, on the plane, is when he said, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And Dawn and I were ecstatic. You just thought, this will be great. And Luann was a little apprehensive about it because, it's a big step. He had a good income, a solid job, steady job. And
what was he doing
leaving
before?
all that? He was installing for True Value.
Yeah, so he had an experience in the installation part of the business, and you had experience in sales.
He had installed for a lot of years before that even. He installed for us at Sherwin-Williams when I was at Sherwin-Williams. And
so the 12 years that you spent at Sherwin-Williams, were you selling flooring there too?
A little bit.
Not mostly
much.
at True Value?
Yeah, True Value was kind of the big kickoff for me for flooring.
Okay. And that went well.
It did. Yeah.
You were quite the flooring salesman.
We took...
yes, he's being very humble. I think that I had heard some projections that you were supposed to hit, and you had like tripled or quadrupled those at.
We did well with that.
True Value.
Yeah.
Are you the reason Sherwin-Williams stopped selling flooring?
No.
Okay. Do they still sell flooring?
They did not in Lowville.
The water been right across the street, right?
Yeah.
Not at the time. They would have been uptown.
Yeah. When I decided to start the flooring store, I talked to Brian because they did sell some flooring at the time, and we had decided where our store is located now is right across the road from True Value where I worked, and right next to Sherwin-Williams where I had worked, and they both were selling flooring. And I felt like, I need to be upfront with these guys. And so I met with Brian, and I told him what I'm thinking about doing. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to have any bad feelings. And I just, because I said, if you don't want me to do this, I won't do it. I'll find something else to do. And he said, basically his words to me were, we don't sell enough flooring to even bother with. And and then I met with Carl Zaire, who was one of the owners of True Value, and he said, you can do that, that's fine, but he said, just remember, there's only so many pieces to the pie, and that was good advice.
Yeah.
So when Ben and Luann came aboard, then in the fall of 2005, we found a building to rent, and then we worked out of a storefront uptown that was freezing cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but we loved it. We had a blast, and it was kind of interesting because being on Main Street, we were like painting the walls, and boxes were coming into the store and displays and all this kind of stuff. And before we were even open, we were selling things out of the boxes. People would stop in and, oh, what are you guys doing? What are you putting in? And we'd tell them, and they're like, oh, well, I need a new floor. What do you have? And so we'd bring them in and sort through boxes and pull stuff out. So it was almost like from the very beginning, it felt like the favor of the Lord was just like, here you go, guys, have at it. And so 18 years now, since we've been at, and
Is your wife calling you?
Couldn't be happier, no.
We can.
Call me.
Why don't we just take a quick break because we're getting some phone calls. I want to make sure it's not not something important.
Okay.
So we'll be right back.
So that doesn't sit down, Brock.
Let me get in my chair. I'm not even back yet. So we're back. No emergencies. No emergencies.
No emergencies. We're all
That's good.
That doesn't really happen. I don't think that happens often. That people take a leap and start a business and see immediate success. Usually there's a period of hardship.
Yeah, for sure.
So that I think I've heard that before, that the beginning of your business seemed to be like it kind of took off. And that is like a trademark blessing. I've always thought of that. Like the favor of the Lord is a good way of putting it.
We did have one time, I remember Dawn would come in to pay the bills, and there was one point in time where she said to us, and Ben and Luann were there, and she said, if I pay all the bills this time, we have $18 left in our checking account. What should I do? Ben's like, well, that's better than being $18 short. Right. So we paid the bills, but it's not to say that was all gravy and everything was great, but we just kind of had an assurance that, when we needed something, it would come in.
Yeah.
And we were busy, very busy from the very beginning. Yeah.
How I would love to hear a little bit about how you scaled the business. So when it started out, it was just you and Ben. Yep. You were the salesman. He was the installer.
Yes. Yep.
And like, how did you get to the point of realizing you needed employees, or like that whole process of scaling is such a challenge for most people. How did you go about that?
It just kind of happened. When we got to the point where we were too busy for one person, like Ben pretty much could have installed by himself, but it's hard work. And so we would try to make sure he had an assistant or somebody that could at least help him carry stuff and get tools and clean up and all that. So Elton Herb was with us for quite a while. And then it was uncanny because it seemed like whenever we needed somebody or felt like we needed somebody would show up. When we were uptown one time, I remember thinking, boy, we're really busy. We could use another person for the install side. And lo and behold, this kid's walking by, and like a day later, and he stops in the store and he says, hey, he says, I'm Matthew Hedges, and I'm just wondering, if you guys could use any help. Like the next day, and sure enough, so we hired him. And, he stayed with us for quite a while. And in the store, on the store side, we started out only being open Tuesday through Saturday. And people told me, you're not going to be able to make it if you're not open 7 days a week. And I said, well, then I'm going to find something else to do because I'm not going to be married to this thing. But shortly after that, Luann worked there I don't know if she worked right away, but she came in and started working, which freed me up some, because I had to go out and do estimates and measurements. And then after a bit, Sherry Taube started working for us, and she was amazing, did a great job, and she's actually still with us now. But we've had a number of people come through, more on the installation side, where they would come. Some were our nephews, and some were people that were just acquaintances, or that somebody told them to come down and try us out. And so scaling it just really never felt like that hard of a thing to do. Now, we're at a point right now where I've got Ben left. He had the nerve to retire a year and a half ago, in February. I know. It's like,
they listen to this pretty regularly.
What are you doing to me, Ben? Ben!
How dare he? You're supposed to just work forever.
I know, at least for the summers especially.
Hired help, you flying back in.
But we're at a point right now, we have a husband and wife team installing for us, and they're wonderful. I have another guy who has there's two installers on his crew that work, and then my son Calder installs and works in the store some, and currently has an apprentice kind of guy working with him, but he's going back to college. So if anybody's listening to this and is interested in working this fall, the late summer, we might be looking for somebody again. But like I said earlier, we just have confidence that the Lord will bring along somebody that we need, and they'll fit in. So we've never really gotten too stressed about it. That's one thing I always appreciated about Ben, was he just never seemed to get stressed about the work side of things.
Yeah. I early on, during our first year of marriage, I worked part-time for you, like very part-time. And as far as like construction type jobs go, like so different than how those normally go. Like, I don't know if it was just a cultural thing that Benny like sent on the installation side. Mm-hmm. Like every day was fun. Yeah. I mean, every day was fun. Like the guys were great. I mean, we just joking around all day long, like just a good environment, which is a huge testament to you and Ben.
Well, as an employer, I want people to look forward to coming to work, and the guys work hard during the day. And, so if we have a few minutes in the store where we can just kind of chill and hang out at the beginning of the day, that's great. And, I don't question the fact that they work really hard all day. And so it would be easy to push because we have so much work, and it would be easy to just like get uptight and think, oh, we got to get, we should be out 2 hours before we get out or whatever on the job. But I don't want to create that kind of environment. I would rather just tell people, we're 6 weeks out or whatever. Just tell them a little further on the other end, just so that the guys don't have to be stressed. As there's enough stress going on in our lives and in our world right now without me adding to it.
Yeah. So the first few years of your business, you said you were downtown.
Yes. Yep. We were in the old Bateman building. And we loved it. We didn't know anything different. But now we have our own building. which we built in 2010. We were in it in our new building, and looking back now, it just seems funny because those first 5 years were hard. Anything we unloaded, we had to carry in off of the street. The truck parked out on Main Street, so we're unloading everything by hand, taking it out by hand, and now we have a little fork truck. And
yeah. Okay. So I was going to ask,
and a warehouse,
location wise.
Yeah.
Location wise, was it? I was going to ask if it was hard to move from Main Street, Lowville, to where you are now on Number 4 Road, which is still a good location, but but yeah, it must have been nice because of just that aspect of like loading and unloading.
When
and
we
stuff.
were contemplating, I tell people I'm good for something for about 5 years, and then I'm kind of looking for something new to get into. But when we were looking for a location, we actually drove to a couple different spots at 5 o'clock at night just to see what the traffic was like. And where we are now, it was crazy busy.
Okay.
And,
wow.
And the other factor was True Value was right there, and Sherwin-Williams was right there. And I thought, well, what a great place to be, right next to the other businesses that bring in homeowners. So
right.
so that worked out well.
Super smart.
Yeah, well, everybody does that. I just learned that this is like a company strategy. So like when Chick-fil-A comes in, Popeyes is across the street.
There's always a Burger
Very
King
strange.
next to a McDonald's.
Exactly.
And Sherwin-Williams, they will get as close to their paint competitors as they can.
Yeah, it's
Whenever
very
they put up a new
interesting.
building. Yeah.
I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
Like conventional wisdom would be
Get as far away as you can.
Yeah, they might steal from your business or vice
Yeah,
versa. But
yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So and that's really interesting. Like, yeah, you guys put a lot of work into deciding that location.
For sure.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
worked out well.
I will say I was also an installer.
Brock was an installer.
No big deal.
Many
I have
years.
a lot of expertise. I'm one of the most tenured employees.
Greatest gopher there ever was. No, that was me.
No, I was very good at that. But I observed your leadership style and Benny's leadership style a lot. And now it's interesting that I implement a lot of the same things. I've had various employers and I was never treated better. And I think I would be able to speak for everybody else. It's the time in the morning to get things going. It's people over processes and results. It is you guys are working in town today. We'll order in pizza. We'll have pizza here for you guys. So that's for you. It's the company dinners after every year, and just pouring into your employees is something I really want to do. I'm passionate about our staff feeling at my company like they're a part, and because they are in my heart, they're family. Like it doesn't go without them. We're equal parts, and we're all important in different ways. So I noticed that about you and you, Ben. So that's a cool thing.
We were working in Boonville one time.
And the stories begin.
If Greg or Jared listen to this, I think they'll probably remember. We had to take a door off the hinges, and so that was my job because that's about all I was good for at the time. So I took the hinge pins out, and I like put things in my teeth. Like if I have a couple screws to like do something, like I'll put them in my teeth as I like use each one or whatever. Like you kind of hold it there like that.
Yeah.
I did that with the hinge pins, which now I look back, that's kind of gross, like somebody else's house, but whatever. Anyway, but there was like, so I get the door off and I put the pins in the hinges. But I'd had them in my teeth, like as I was taking them out. So anyway, so I walk out into the main room and Greg and Jared are like snickering. And it took a little bit because they were like joking behind my back about it, but like I had grease on my face.
No,
from the hinge pins, the hinge pins, and they were but like eventually like it was I got in on the joke, and it was funny though, like it was like it was a funny thing. It wasn't like they were making fun of me. Like I remember the culture and like how fun it was to be on those jobs, and like. Something like that can be, negative on a construction site, but like with those guys, everything was like a good time, and
you have to be able to laugh at each other and with each other. And it's the same, in a marriage and anything. You have to get to that point where you can just laugh. Yeah, it's for sure.
And Brock is right. Like I still think of that stuff when it comes to like managing, even like not even within our business, but like just with people in general, when you're working with people, to remember to keep it light and have a gracious heart
Yeah.
as much as you can. It's challenging sometimes, but yeah, I feel blessed to have been around. Your business was one of the few that I had that experience with. The next job that I got after that was the same experience. You know, I had another great boss, and learned a lot from him. But yeah, I feel really blessed to have had a small glimpse into how you run your business, and it taught me a lot. And I still remember a lot of that stuff and try to implement it. Yeah, I feel very fortunate.
You know, I learned a lot of things from my uncle when I worked on the farm for him when I was a kid living at home. And he was the kind of boss that he wouldn't ask you to do something that he wasn't willing to do himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I feel the same way. I feel like the toilet needs to be cleaned, I'm going to go clean the toilet. Or, you know, if the floor needs to be swept, I'm not above that stuff, you know. And I think when you get into corporate America, you get a lot of that.
Yeah, the command structure.
Yeah.
Even in my policing career, there was sergeants or lieutenants who you knew would go to war for you and with you, and then there was others maybe not so much. Yeah. And you could tell who had a more consistent, stronger following, and the camaraderie between them and all of their subordinates, I guess you would call it, was more healthy. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And your business has been around for almost 20 years, so there's something to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about.
I know.
In those early years, would have you been able to think, okay, in 20 years, I'm still going to be doing this. We're going to be successful?
No. I mean, I just kind of was taking it, you know, we're here today and we'll be here for the next few weeks and we'll see where we are after that. You know, it's definitely been a different shift in what I thought, but that's okay.
One thing you said that I really appreciate too is the whole being closed on Sunday and Monday thing, and people telling you you're never going to make it, this and that. As a new business, there is a lot of pressure, especially with like internet entrepreneurs nowadays. Like kids are seeing guys on TikTok talk about like put in the hard work and the 24/7 mindset, right. And it's almost like that probably is how, like, that is one way to do it. But I just really appreciate you in the early days, just being fine with having a work-life balance.
Yeah.
Taking that weekend, that Sunday, Monday weekend, and that it doesn't have to be all sacrificial and family to the side for the business. Even like in the early days when stereotypically people are made to think that that's what you have to do to make your business work.
Right.
I really appreciate that too. In our business now, like we've joked about not taking calls on Saturday and Sunday, and like we're brand new.
Yeah.
But like we also have families with young kids, and it's not willing to sacrifice that time. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for young entrepreneurs to hear, you don't have to have that 24/7, 365 mindset to be a hard worker in your new business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a good lesson.
For sure.
Yeah. Don't forget the other important things in your life too.
Right. The things that are going to be there at the end, you know, I don't know if it had something to do with the fact that, you know, I was maybe a little older when we started the business. You know, I would have been, 20 years minus 63 is. So I'd have been, you know,
43,
early 40s.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know if by that point in time, if it would have been different if I'd have been 23, maybe. But I learned one lesson I learned early on was you don't need every job that comes through the door either, you know.
Yeah.
But the temptation is that you want it because, you know, you feel like, well, we've got to have this. You know, there are other people depending on me being busy. You know, I have employees and this and that, but the Lord has provided for us, and we're just been very grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Let's transition. We got a couple batteries. We're only 15 minutes into this section, but we got a couple batteries about to go out. I'd like to just ask you about marriage when we come back, and then we'll close up.
Yep.
Does that sound good?
Very good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We are back. Nick, we're back.
Okay.
We ended the break wanting to talk a little bit about marriage because not only do you have a very lasting and good marriage, at least from the outside, looks that way, but you have done some marriage counseling and stuff too, which is very valuable, and I think something that we should tap into. So if you want to just give us a brief synopsis of
Sure.
the early years in your marriage, some things that you learned, and then moving out from there.
Okay. So a number of years ago when I was pastoring at Rhema, we had done a 6-week marriage seminar, I guess, if you want to call it that, for people in the church. And we had a good turnout there. And one thing we learned was that they want to hear real people in honesty. Because I remember when we used to joke, but it was real, that I think at the time we were probably married for like 20 years. And we would tell people, we've been married for 20 years and we've been happily married for 10 years. Which was the truth, because the first 10 years of our marriage were not the best. Dawn kind of felt like she's stuck in this relationship for the rest of her life. And I was like, there was no way I was going to tell Dad that we were getting separated or having problems or anything. Not that it got to that point, but the fact was, when we shared that with people, it was just like, oh, they're being real. We can be real, and that kind of thing. And I think it also, for us, it came down to the fact that we made a commitment, we made a covenant to each other before God, and we weren't going to break it. And we we kind of decided, if we're going to be miserable for the next 60 years, then we are, but we're going to be miserable together. And so we, at that point, when we started doing this marriage thing, just before that, we had several breakthroughs. We had gone to a few different marriage seminars, marriage retreats, those kinds of things that helped, that gave us, started seeing some keys. And then we also started doing some things together, just the two of us. Like we tapped into the personality tests, which really helped us understand not only the other person, but ourselves, and, why we respond the way we do, or why we act the way we do, or what motivates us. We did a pretty intensive study on personality traits, and we did a pretty intensive study on motivational gifts. And, one of the neat things about that was, there's a positive side and a negative side to each one of the motivational gifts. Well, I've always been more of a negative person. Like, my first thoughts are usually negative, and so I'm trying to learn, to speak less. Like it says, it's better for a person to remain quiet and for people to think him a fool than to open his mouth and prove them right. So
remove all doubt.
Yeah, remove the doubt.
Yeah.
And so, I'm still trying to do that more and more. But so when we would get to the point where we were struggling with something, we were able to use those tools to kind of look at what's really happening here. What's the underlying motivation, and why are we flipping to this side instead of this side, or whatever. And that helped us, like in counseling with other people, we would do personality tests, and that was probably one of the biggest things. And then just learning to lighten up. I remember one time we were getting ready to go somewhere, and I said something, must not have been real nice, and Dawn was on the other side of the bedroom, and she had a hairspray can in her hand. And she just kind of tossed it over at me, and it hit me in the tooth. And I just looked at her, and all of a sudden I said, "Since when do you start hitting what you're aiming for?" And it just broke, and we just cracked up laughing. And that was kind of a thing for us to learn. And there was another time where we were probably in some pretty intense fellowship over something, and we were in Watertown in one of the big grocery stores, and we're going through the tea aisle, and there was a tea called Tension Tamer. And so we're going by that, and I just started pulling them all into the cart, and we both started cracking up laughing. But it breaks that moment, and it gives you keys. So yeah, for us it was learning about ourselves and also learning about the other person. And I think for any couple, and you guys and the younger generation, I feel like have such a big advantage because you guys talk about this stuff. My parents didn't talk about any of it. And we talked about it less than what you guys do, but more than what our parents did. But find the tools and to be able to implement those, and to use those to help other couples, is really very rewarding when you see somebody get a hold of that and able to turn their relationship with their spouse. I am convinced that when people want to make things work, they can. Because for us, I was very controlling, and Dawn was very, free-spirited, wanted to do her own thing, and it would bother me that she would, just want to go and hang out with a bunch of women, for topical tea or whatever, or a mom's homeschool group meeting. And I'd be like, when are you getting home? All this stuff, just kind of controlling. And I remember really one of the keys for me personally was not only those studies, but I was reading through Ephesians, and in Ephesians 5, toward the end of the chapter, it talks about marriage, and it talks about a few other things. And I'm reading it, and a verse hit me side to head, and it was like, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And I stopped there, and there's a lot more to that verse. I don't want to take it out of context, but that hit me, and I'm thinking, Christ died for the church, which is pretty incredible. I would die for my wife. You guys would die for your wives, no question. Mm-hmm. But then I read a little further, and I started realizing he also lived for the church. Everything he did, his whole life on earth, was for the church. And it got my brain going, and I'm like, what does that mean, to live for Dawn? Mm. And how do I serve her? How do I show her that, I'm not here for myself. I'm here for you. I'm here for what I can do to, present her to me in a way that would be pleasing. And it changed my whole mindset. And I remember, and she would remember this, when she would go to a topical tea meeting or a homeschool moms meeting, I would say, you go, you have a good time, stay as late as you want. And she'd be like, who's this guy? And what'd you do with my husband? But there was this whole switch. And it was, I think it was the fact that that word kind of resonated with me. Mm-hmm. And it totally changed our relationship to the point where she didn't even know she wanted to go to the meetings, because she kind of liked being home with this new guy, whoever he was. And
interesting.
So and so that was probably the biggest breakthrough for me. But then to be able to share that experience with other people and say, you can control things if you want, but there's a better way to do it. There's a more beneficial way. And in the end, you get to reap the benefit of them wanting to be with you more and enjoying those times. So it was a number of things that culminated from thinking, we're just kind of doomed for, forever and ever, to the point where now, we just love being together. We love working on projects together. And so it's been a really good thing.
Cool. Yeah. So how many years?
It'll be 43.
43
June 27th.
years.
Yeah.
So for anybody listening that's maybe in the first 10 years and is struggling,
take notes.
Yeah.
What would you say is some of the, you said, we found some keys and some breakthroughs. Yeah. What are those?
So the keys are learning, educating yourself and learning about your spouse and learning about yourself and what makes you tick and what are the personality traits was huge, because knowing that she operated one way and I was like totally opposite, but we could come together. And same with the motivational gifts. Those two things were huge for us. And there's so much out there for resource. There's teachings, there's books, there's people. You have people on here that would be great for young couples to go to and talk to. And I think that's one of the biggest lies of the enemy, is that he tries to get people to think that, or couples to think that, you're in this alone. People don't want to hear your problems. People don't want to know what you're struggling with. And that's just exactly the opposite of what needs to happen. You know, they need to get counsel. Dawn and I got counsel. One of the things we did was we did get some counseling from some friends of ours that we could trust. And it was hard. It's not fun, you know, kind of putting some things on the table. But until you're willing to humble yourself and to do that, you know, that when the light reveals the darkness has to go. So
yeah, it comes back to intentionality. Learn how to be good
Absolutely.
at this.
Yeah.
Learn how to be a good father. Learn how to be a good husband. It's important. It's the most important things. Think about the things that you would line up, you know, on a top 10 scale in your mind of what matters the most. And if those aren't at the very top, like within the top 3, then get good at them. Learn. Figure it out.
Yep.
Still doing that every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Pride, right? Pride probably has a lot to do with it. Setting
It
that
does.
aside.
It does,
Learning
because
how to
you
be
want
humble.
other people to think that, you know, everything's great. And, you know, you don't want to get through that facade of them realizing that, you know, we all deal with things, you know, everybody has their thing. And to be able to just lay it on the table and let it take care of. And Dawn's really good at that. She's really good at seeing through some things and in our relationship, working back and forth, and I'm getting better at it too. It's just it's got, you know, it's got a lot of benefit that we can both grow through.
Yeah. Well, you are a good example of just humility. And you're a great father-in-law, great father, I'm sure. And you married us both, since we're on the topic of marriage. You officiated both of our weddings. Yep. And I couldn't think of a better person to do it because it was the truth coming from you. You're just an all-round great man.
I'm a very grateful man. I feel that I have just been really, I don't know how else to say it, blessed beyond measure. My daughter-in-laws and my son-in-laws, I couldn't have handpicked anybody better for who they have. I mean, it's easier with the daughter-in-laws. It's pretty tough to give away your girls.
Great.
My bad.
So you know.
That's all I have.
I knew it. Don't worry, I knew it.
But it's been awesome, and you know, and I love our family, and one of the most important things to me, godly spouses, incredible grandchildren. It's the best, you know. But both Dawn and I, we tell people, you know, we hit the jackpot. We won the lottery, you know, with our in-laws. I don't even like to call them in-laws, but so we're very thankful, Nick, and you're part of that. Yeah. And all of them, Sam and Stephanie and Ashlyn and Nicole and Shay. It's just like, wow, it's awesome. It's just very rewarding.
Yeah, it's fruit from a tree.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, you know, we'll kind of wrap up here, and hopefully we can have you on again to talk some about parenting. And I just want you to know, it is kind of a Father's Day edition. It's going to release probably 2 weeks after Father's Day. But Father's Day was a couple days ago, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
You're the guy that I look up to the most in every aspect, really. And I thank you, because you put in a lot of hard work, and it's time and time again, it's come back tenfold. And you don't know the impact that it has on me, but I do. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Rock on.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
You're the best.
Welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
See you later.
All right. See you, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks.
Goodbye.